everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bits About Bots, where I talk to industry leaders about what they're seeing in the world of digital transformation. Now, that's taken a number of turns. We've seen it cast as BOAT most recently in Gartner, and I think we're somewhere in that category if we play it out. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is debunk what's real and what's operationally viable today in the world of AI. And in this particular episode, I'll be talking to our partners from Tungsten, represented by Adam. And I met him in New York. He gave such a compelling and just down to earth perspective of AI, which I think is so refreshing right now when everybody's talking about the hype. So I'm thrilled to introduce Adam. Please introduce yourself. Let everybody know a little bit about you, a little bit about Tungsten. Looking forward to this discussion.
Sure, me too, Paula. Thanks for having me. Adam Field, Chief AI Officer at Tungsten Automation. Previously was Chief Product Officer at Tungsten Automation. Been here about 5 years. Just a little bit about Tungsten. Many of you may have known us for 37 or 8 years of our existence as Kofax. We rebranded in 2024 to Tungsten Automation. We're in the intelligent document processing space, which is all about making sense of all of the information that's buried in documents inside of an organization, making that data available to these powerful AI models so that you can automate your business as best as possible.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, so let's get into it a little bit more about Tungsten. So with this rebrand, I think one of the elements that you guys are constantly staying true to is this concept of what the definition of content is. So I think before talking anything about agents or AI, it's important to kind of frame the importance of data foundations and being able to access it, govern it, manage it, still have the guardrails around it. So let's talk a little bit about that first, as far as like the setup, in getting prepared for that. Because then I think we can talk a little bit about why the importance of staying true to your core, through the rebrand, ultimately empowering the actual product, which is extrapolating information from content. And you guys call all documents content. So tell us a little bit about, some of those definitions.
You're right. It's worth spending a minute before we talk about technology, appreciating the challenge and defining that foundation and what we mean. So I mentioned that we're in this space called intelligent document processing, or IDP. But I think in recent years, with new capabilities, AI technologies that have come out, the word document even is, I'm having to redefine it quite often with my customer base. Of course, we still mean the paper document that's been digitized, which there's still a lot of out in the world, even though you would think in 2026 that would be gone. It's not. Of course, we still also mean digital documents, PDFs, spreadsheets, that kind of thing. But more and more, we also mean any source of what we call unstructured data, unstructured information, unstructured content. So what we mean by that is, think about emails that come into your organization. There could be thousands of them a month. That's all a quote unquote document. You think about if you're in a contact center, you run a contact center and you're transcribing the calls that are coming in. That's all unstructured content. You have contracts. There's research you do out on the web. There's news stories, social posts. Anything that doesn't have a firm structure to that information is a document that we can help our customers make sense of. And that data, the challenge is, many analysts, and I've read many different analyst reports, will tell you that over 80% of information inside large organizations is quote unquote unstructured, or what's known as dark data, meaning it exists, but maybe humans are looking at it, often not. But even if they are, these new AI models most certainly aren't. So it's sitting there dark, waiting, for it to be extracted and applied to these models so that customers and these organizations can do something with it. So that's the challenge. And then I think, we can dive into how we do it, the technology, the possibilities, the outcomes that it's driving.
Yeah. Well, so I think, and this is probably my process improvement brain coming in, but I always like to reverse engineer. And now we are truly at a place where when we sit down with a client, we say, no, like, tell me the dream story. Like, what's the dream outcome? The dashboard that does what? That says this here and explains the correlation between X, Y, and Z in the past what years? And so the dream is able to be a reality by reverse engineering. But I think, and one of the things that we kind of talk through is, the naming convention, the schema, ensuring that, you're talking apples to apples on a vendor, management portal, and it's not necessarily that you have to define them one for one, which used to be the painstaking, task in advance, of any project like that, any data project. It was the man hours of actually, pivot tabling your way to,
Oh,
consumable Excel spreadsheets,
yeah.
in a structured format. You don't have to do that anymore, right? So let's talk a little bit about how, even though that is the most important lift, the lift has gotten lighter. And our partnership, I know we have a solution together that kind of
Mhm.
infuses via chat. What is the stuff that you need to pull so that we can begin to build, these reports and these outputs that our clients have been asking for? It's augmenting one of our solutions. So let's talk a little bit about that. Kind of the advent of document automation, and then that'll kind of tie us into the tool itself.
Yeah.
But I think sort of the history is important to note, like OCR, extract
Yeah,
the
yeah,
one little
yeah.
bit, it has to be tab worthy, we've come a long way.
We have. All right, let's talk about it. So, what you just referred to is the spectrum of document types: structured, semi-structured, unstructured. So, a structured document, think about a tax form you receive. Everyone in the US, generally, their tax forms look exactly the same. The government defines it. There's a finite number of fields. We know what it looks like. We've seen it millions of times. That's not all that challenging anymore. I mean, back during the founding of our company, that was really revolutionary technology. Now that's not as it's been become a bit commoditized, but still, I mean, really important for organizations to grab that structured data. You think about then the next level of that is semi-structured. So how about an invoice you get from a supplier of yours? The structure is in the line items. You bought this quantity of that product for that unit price subtotal. That's structured. There's other information on there that might move around, like the address and the account numbers and any descriptions at the bottom. Every invoice might look a little bit different. So that's what we call semi-structured. Unstructured is kind of like what I talked about a moment ago. Think about a contract. No two contracts look exactly the same. It's got paragraphs, images, tables, references, footnotes. It could be one page or 1,000 pages long. We just don't know. And how this technology has evolved, where it's really, really exciting now, is these models are capable of making sense of all that. Now, to your point, the difference in approach is quite stark between how you would approach the former, the structured documents, and now the unstructured. You're right. We spend a lot of time saying if we want that structured information, the tax amounts, the line items on an invoice, we should think about the schema and understand what it's like, what it looks like, and what your ERP system looks like, and the tables that we're putting it in. That's fine. But now, no one wants to or needs to spend the time to do that. So, there's a concept of zero shot. I don't have to train the system on understanding this contract or this new type of form. I just give it to it. The model goes, oh, I know what type of contract that is. I know what type of email this is. I can pull out the information that I need, and then I can do whatever you want me to do with it. If you want me to structure it and put it somewhere, I can. But if you just want me to put it in a knowledge repository so you have access to it later, I can do all that too. And that's where this technology is so exciting.
Exactly, exactly. And so with that, not to quote the founders of our company being, former Ernst and Young, but the art of the possible, as they call it, I think is
Yeah.
finally real. It's not this
Yeah.
dream delusion, right? And so the art behind the possible is that governance layer, right? So it's not
Mm.
just willy-nilly across the board, everybody having the inputs of these items of data exposing something. Now we're talking about getting this done at enterprise scale. And that's truly the revolutionary part of the solutions that we're able to build, the agents that we're able to deploy,
Mm.
and the inputs from all this, this data optimization, automation, and ultimately, gathering and
Hmm.
aggregation, right? Like it's like we're getting all these tremendous amounts of data. And I have to remind myself sometimes too, when I'm interacting with AI, I don't need to structure this the way that a human would linearly
Right.
understand my story. I can throw a whole bunch of data in here at the same time. Honestly, it's probably better because they can make sense of
What
my mess
one
of
of my
notes, right?
favorite things I do now is every meeting that I'm in, I use Claude. I created a skill, and I just throw anything that comes out at Claude. And then at the end, I say organize it, and it puts it in. It
Exactly.
takes all these ideas, puts them together, finds action items, all
Exactly.
this stuff, summarizes it for me.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's
So
changed.
so
Yeah.
imagine that at scale, right? So that what you described, I think, is what a lot of people are experiencing, which is user productivity. Why do I have to think about this any further? I'm already making my
Yeah.
job easier. I'm doing smart things like doing follow-ups, like my emails aren't sitting in drafts for 3 days. There's some optimization to Paula's life now, right? But the real win is being able to say, okay, at scale, when a new lead comes into our marketing demand engine, I want the seller to be fortified with all the data, all the attributes, all the past interactions that we've had, every single line item that might be relevant to what this buyer's mood is. If we have access to Facebook and it looks like there was a divorce this week, maybe we don't reach out, right? Any single kind of attribute is now on the table. That used to take an hour per effective prospecting in my BD day.
Yeah.
That was per hour. We're talking replacing agencies that can't ingest the amount of knowledge share that you can for your own company now.
Yeah.
Truly revolutionary things being done at scale, not each on a desktop. So what I'd love for you to talk about a little bit is the importance of the governance, the guardrails, even some of the legal policies that clients have to begin to put in place, because it is fun and sexy and shiny, but much like that Ferrari, if you go too fast without guardrails, you might spin out, right? So
Yeah.
so we want to make sure that we kind of caution our clients, who are testing, and we have so many pilots coming on board to Tungsten Automation, through our managed service. And I'm thinking through, what are the things that they have to know? What are the things to put in place, in
Sure.
your view?
Well, what is it? One of our favorite superheroes said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So,
Exactly.
um, uh, what I'll give you an example. So, part of my responsibility here at Tungsten is, aside from doing AI research and owning our AI strategy that we bring to market and put in our products, I also own our internal AI strategy. So, I started this new role in January, and everyone was clamoring, like, give us the tools, give us the tools, because we had piloted a few of them. And what we realized is, handing someone ChatGPT or Claude, it was good. You got a little bit of um, better efficiency, and you learn some things, and you could do some stuff faster. But the real power came from when you could give these tools context, give it all of that data that we just talked about. So what we wanted to do is, we wanted to make sure that we did it right. So even though we had the power to say, we're going to do this, we're going to roll out all these tools to everyone, we spent the better part of 6 months getting it right. And the way we did that, and to answer your question about what everyone out there needs to be thinking about, is we sat down and we said, okay, if we're going to roll out Claude to everyone, what systems inside of our organization would we want them to have access to? How would they use that data? So we started analyzing, okay, Salesforce, our ERP system, our training system. We also looked at where Tungsten. So where are there, a bunch of documents that we might want to extract information from? Well, we've got our product documents. We have 40 years of contracts. We have all of our marketing collateral. We have a lot of different things. Okay, Tungsten should be part of it. And then we identified probably 25 different systems. Then we met with our security team, and they said, well, to be compliant with GDPR and CCPA and all of these other things, we need to make sure that security obviously is taken into consideration. These things need to be redacted. These groups should have access. These groups should not have access. So, Paula, what it ended up happening was, the technology was not the constraint. It was, we just got to make sure we get this right. And so we put together a small pilot group of some trusted employees, and we began testing it, and we began building even some infrastructure ourselves, and worked with these other vendors to create connections. And then little by little, now we're rolling this out to groups of employees at a time. And the output's been remarkable in a couple of ways. One is, I'm starting to see much more consistency in what people are creating. So no
Yep.
longer are they just handing me something for review where I have to say, no, that's not on brand. That's not what we're talking about. It's pulling from our sources. So it's on brand. The other amazing thing I see is people raising their hands, wanting to participate and create new skills and create new apps. And they're working with us to get them brought into the ecosystem. They're helping their peers. There's these discussion groups where everyone's helping one another. But we can get into more of that. But I guess to summarize all that is you've got to spend a minute getting the foundation right. I think in the New York event where I was presenting, you might have heard me call it boring AI. Like you've got to do all that boring stuff so that you can get to the exciting work. Because if you don't, you'll end up on the front page of some news outlet that I'm sure you don't want to be on the front page for that reason.
Exactly. And I think that's the shiny toy versus the reality. It's
Yeah,
very easy to kind of flock towards the shiny outcome. And it even looks great. You can go all the way to, building a website, an entire company and a strategy through AI.
sure.
But is it grounded in something real and tangible? And that's where that intervention comes in the foundations. One of the things I think also, that's changed along the way is the importance of different roles and skill sets. And
Mm,
I feel like, humans have become commoditized in what they say. So it's now I think the trend is we don't need any, freshers or, junior employees anymore because we've completely, done away with their jobs. If you're not teaching context along the way, then you're not going to have anybody grow into ultimately being the managers of
mm,
today. It makes absolutely no sense. We had a wave of data engineers and data scientists. And if you didn't have one of those on board, you weren't really AI ready. And so all these different elements, coming through there. And then now, as you referenced, we have things like enterprise Claude, Claude for business, Claude for small business, different elements that pull in models that adhere to what you'd ultimately need,
mm.
with a reduced spend, right? So even that's getting more accessible. So with all the changing ecosystem of both technology, the definition of a workforce, right, including agents and AI now, and the type of talent that you're seeking. What does a chief AI officer hire for?
Right.
And what would you suggest for things to learn and building of skill sets, either in an upskill environment or maybe somebody coming out of college, new to the workforce going, oh, they don't need me anymore. What would you say to that?
Well, this is personal for me because I have a 19-year-old son who's about to go into his second year of college, and he asks me all the time, "What should I focus on?" and all that. So, a few things. In general, I think the future employee looks more like a generalist with a speciality rather than someone who just has a deep speciality in something. Now, let me just say, if you're a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon, yeah, that's going to be your specialty, right? Like you want someone who focuses just on that. But in my world, like if I was going to hire an AI strategist or a product manager, I'm no longer just hiring a product manager who has experience in managing roadmaps and understands a little bit about um, features and taking in customer feedback and managing the deployment of a product. Now with these tools, I'm hiring product managers who understand good UI design, who can get their hands dirty and prototype and build the first examples quickly within hours and say, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm hiring people who understand the business behind why customers buy, maybe pricing, go to market strategy, can help with marketing campaigns, and then can do all the other things that product managers do. Now, you might say, well, they're going to be overwhelmed if they have to do all of those things. But this is where these tools come in. So I was a software developer for the early part of my career. When we decided to bring the new AI features and technologies into Tungsten 4 years ago, I built the first prototypes because now I could again, because those tools were available to me. It didn't take me any more time. In fact, we reduced the amount of time it took to get those things to market. So I think you need to be a bit of a generalist. You can't just like own one thing and say, I'm just a marketer. You have to be a marketer that understands tech deeply, design, why people buy, go to market strategies, etc. So I encourage my son. He's going to focus on he likes marketing and he's going to a business school and he's working towards his MBA. But I told him take a public speaking class. Take design classes to understand good like software design. Of course, focus on his business degree. Like he needs to understand a whole wide spectrum of skills. Otherwise, why pay someone just to do one particular task? I just don't think that's going to work.
No, and I think that ties in beautifully to this concept of orchestration that everybody's trying to nail, right? Because if you are going to be an effective knowledge worker, human, whatever
Mm.
our ultimate label as workers is going to be. But if you are, the human, as part of a process, then you're going to also have to be able to understand the interaction between the other systems and the other functions. So I think one of the reasons that I've been so effective in marketing is because I was so embedded in sales to understand the deficiency or the gap,
Mm.
or the feedback even that was needed, for both of those to coexist. So I think you're right on a generalist. And I think the principle of empathy has sort of been thrown around
Oh,
a lot too.
yeah.
And I don't know if that's the track, but I think it's understanding the outcomes that your partners are trying to achieve. And I think you can learn that in college. I think you can learn that in networking, but really trying to align to the common goal. Like, you get paid on what? Your bonus is based on what that you have to do? Okay, cool. Well, I have to do this, so let's meet here.
Yeah.
And better yet, leaders, make sure that your incentives match the behavior that you're
Yeah.
ultimately trying
Well,
to achieve in
well,
AI.
I always say human nature does not evolve nearly at the pace as technology, right? So we are just, I mean, we're a bunch of cells and we have emotions, and you mentioned empathy, and we want to shake a hand and see people, and so that human element is still going to be necessary. Whenever I'm on my social feeds and I'm looking at news stories about the industry and I hear X is dead and this technology has just killed this, I roll my eyes and look at it as an opportunity to, like, just combat that statement. Because look, most of the time there's a sliver of reality in those things, but it's mostly hype and scare tactics. The sliver of reality is there will be some jobs displaced, but
Mhm.
that's been happening for centuries. Any new technological evolution, there are some displacement, but new jobs get created. There's new jobs now that didn't exist years ago. And I'm starting to see jobs get created, highly paid jobs, by the way, to even in marketing. You just mentioned you're a marketer. Jobs, people making a lot of money helping differentiate companies in this world of AI slop,
Mhm.
and bringing that human element to it again. So, I mean, hey, wired headphones are coming
Are
back,
cool
right? Because
again.
we just want to, like, feel, like maybe we were wound,
Connected.
yeah, connected
Yeah,
again.
no,
So,
I think it was. It kind of went into this great, ethos of digital transformation and buzzword here and buzzword there and IDP OCR. I used to call it the ABCs of, digital transformation, RPA.
no more
And
acronyms.
now it's kind of like, all right, you got to get the outcome. There's a lot of tools to get there. What is the most cost effective approach to get from point A to point B, right? And it
Mm.
might include a blend of RPA and a little bit of AI. It might include a little bit of Claude. It might include a little bit of Tungsten. And so depending on how those elements converge, I think that's why you get, partnered with people who've done this, because then you don't have to, reinvent the wheel on those things. The talent too, that you mentioned, as far as the generalist, I think that plays into kind of, the democratization that generative AI gave to people like me. I'm not a
Hmm.
coder, but I can now mock up my view of what I want the website to look like,
Yep.
and I don't need to do, what you said, that tedious prototype. I can prototype myself, 6 or 7 iterations to start, at a spot.
But to take
Tell
it
me,
to the next,
yeah.
level,
Hmm.
I don't know if people believe some of the things they write and say, or they just say it to get clicks. I think
It's true.
somewhere maybe in between. But you read all these stories about software developers are dead. No, software development job has changed. We're not writing as much code, but everything you just pointed out, how do you take it to production? There's a laundry list of things that software engineers need to look at to understand and make sure they're in compliance, it's performant, they're doing it right. I mean, you read story after story of people not doing it right, and it puts your data and your company at risk. And I showed a chart in one of my recent presentations that showed software engineering jobs were decreasing. And then about a year and a half ago, it's been a hockey stick spike in openings for software engineers. Well, why is that? As Claude and all these tools have gotten better, we're now hiring more software engineers. Yes, as we invest more in AI and we grow and we create more product and we do more, we need professionals to support it and sell it, et cetera. So I'm bullish on eventually AI not just being about cutting costs and cutting headcounts and cutting clicks, because I think that's an awful way to look at all this great technology, but creating better product, reacting faster to the market, driving revenue, creating new jobs. That to me is, I think, where this is all going to lead.
Oh, absolutely. And and even inciting creativity, right? So one of the
Yeah.
other things too is you have to remember humans are, innately human. So in the world of marketing, for example, you might have, brain fog or, not have a creative bone to get a campaign out. But if you're prompted with the prompts that you've given that are good ideas based on market trends, you could even get influenced by some of the logic that you put into it.
Mm,
I think another important thing, in kind of talking through, the transition over time is kind of looking at all the hype in different software companies. So I think UiPath is one that comes to mind immediately. Heavy valuation numbers prior to an IPO. Now
mm,
recasting is agentic. You've got, SS&C Blue Prism coming on the scene with, different guardrails around AI, and leveraging some of their legacy chorus BPM, modules, Tungsten Automation, some of traditional Kofax, RPA. So I feel like everybody's kind of in this moment of software rebrand refresh. I know we partnered with you because of the proficiency behind the document automation modules, and the workflow management and case management is just, so ideal for so many of our solutions. But talk a little bit about what you've seen, both from your vantage point, but also in the market, how clients are responding to that. And then we'll get into a little bit about what we're seeing as far as, valuation numbers changing, like
sure.
what do we see in hype versus reality? Would love to get your perspective.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of different vendors, and I've been in this space a long time. And you're right. We've all come at it from different angles. Some started in RPA and then got into workflow and maybe document processing. Some started in document processing, added all those other capabilities. Some started in workflow, added RPA doc. So, but we've all kind of, you mentioned boat at the very beginning, the Gartner
Yeah.
boat, right? I
Yep.
think that's why they created Get in the Boat, and they created all these different elements because they started to see that a lot of these companies were all coming together and maybe offering some similar capabilities. And that's both the opportunity but the challenge. So most of my customers say, we're excited about the message that you're delivering. We're excited about the opportunity. We're excited about what some of your customers have done and the outcomes that they've given, but we need to understand, like, help guide us, right? AI is powerful but can be confusing. Many vendors sound the same. They all say they can do the same thing. I did a little experiment myself where I went in that internet wayback machine archive.org, and I looked at
Mhm.
some businesses' websites. And then I fast forwarded 9 months later, and the exact same thing that used to be called a bot was now called an agent, with
It was just
very
like rip
little.
and replace, like find and replace.
Yeah, find and replace bot to agent, right? And there was very little that changed under the covers because I know these technologies and I've used them. And so how do we help our customers cut through that hype? More importantly, how do we help them get started, but also be honest in throughout the whole thing and say, this is where tungsten adds value. Because what we're seeing in this new agentic world is you're likely not going to do everything for one of the biggest banks in the world. I even said our internal implementation to get all of our data brought together, Tungsten played a big role in it, but there was also other systems that we put in our data pipeline to give all of that information to our employees. And I think we have to recognize that, be honest with our customers, own what we're really good at, guide them along the way. Also, to point out, like, this technology is powerful and many will lead you to believe that you just turn it on and everyone goes away. And it's more of an art than people want to make it. I mean, obviously, there's a ton of science there, right? It's maybe the most powerful technology of my career, but there's an art to figuring out how do I use it for my particular use case? Even a powerful technology platform like Tungsten, we work with partners like you to help our joint customers figure out, should I use that model or that model? Do I tweak that thing in Tungsten or that thing in Tungsten? For my particular use case, how should I ingest and break up and store the information in that document? That requires a lot of know-how in order to get right.
Absolutely. And I think the context behind why some of those things make sense goes back to your point about the generalist. If you don't understand how the dots are connecting and what you're evaluating,
Yeah.
you're really not going to understand what the ultimate outcome is and a path for throughput, right?
Mm.
So one of the other things that I think is important to note, too, we briefly touched on kind of, how the ecosystem is changing. What are you seeing as far as the adoption as you're getting closer to rolling out, as
Mm.
your own customer zero? And we have this too in marketing. I launched the, kind of a little preview teaser of, this prospecting cheat sheet that the sellers are
Mm.
going to get. And they're all excited that they're going to get all this extra information from,
Yeah.
from marketing before they get to go hunting. But so, as you're adopting it, what is kind of the, the sentiment, because you do know, like I do, this isn't just a project right now. This is the beginning of changing the way we do work, truly.
Yeah.
So from that context and that vantage point that, how do you see folks adopting, what are the tranches that you're thinking about going down? Is it by systems? Is it by interactivity?
Mm,
Is it by, like approval workflows? How is it that you're rolling this out and thinking through, the
yeah.
adoption strategy?
I think the mistake that I see some making is they focus on discrete tasks in an overall
Mhm,
process. So AI is really good at automating a discrete task. I
mhm,
want you to filter my email. I want you to summarize this. I want you to
mhm,
write this thing. I
mhm,
want you to just go search for that, that bit of information. And that's okay, and it'll get some adoption. But what we encourage our customers to think about is step back, think about the processes that power your business. Not just think about how you've always done them, but think about how you would ideally do it. Take technology off the table and say, in an ideal world, here's what my customers expect. We used to talk about how Amazon set expectations across every industry where people wanted things immediately and their feed was tailored to them. Well, now ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude are setting expectations for information at your fingertips in a moment's notice and how we work differently. So I encourage our customers to think about that end to end process and how they would optimize it with new technology. Think about new use cases that they've never even considered with tungsten before, because we have new technologies that can address different use cases inside of their organizations that weren't possible. So, how do we extend the work that we've already done across these long running processes, across these very core processes in their business? To do them differently and make them
mhm.
better, take humans out of the loop when they were never meant to be in the loop in the first place, so they can focus. You mentioned empathy, so they can be empathetic to their customers, so they can do the jobs that you hired them. Your marketers, so they can market instead of wasting time, on a bunch of tasks that you never hired them to do in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, updating URLs to match the
Oh,
structured data perfectly for a
yeah,
bulk
just tell
upload.
Claude to do it every time I make a change. Make sure I go do it. Now double
Make
check
sure
it, of
something
course.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and then again, doing that wholesale, right? Ensuring that when you make an amendment to perhaps, it's the most annoying thing ever when you go to a doctor's appointment or you fill out a form online and then you still have to fill it out when you get to the other place. No, if I gave you my updated address on every single record that you have in your freaking company, you better have my
Are
corrected,
you
updated
at my
address.
kid's school? Because I think, they
They have
it's
the
pretty
same
much what
thing
they
going on.
practice. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. But those kind of things become unacceptable. And one plot twist that I've done too, since I am a vendor, but I also have vendors, is I also encourage them to get with it too. It's no longer acceptable that you can't get me all the contact information just because I gave you an, company name. If you don't have
Mhm.
the URL and you can't figure it out, then what kind of a data, support company are you? Right. And that is a call out. Figure out who that is. But anyway, so we've had to level ourselves up too, I think,
Oh,
and Tungsten holds us to a high regard with the certifications and the know-how that we have to be able to practice, and to claim the titanium certification, right? That comes with know-how and understanding. And just like we place a bet on you, that the technology will evolve and the roadmap's going to be disclosed so that we can continue to build alongside you. So I
well,
think that is
yeah.
important now too, is the level and standards are elevating
Well,
along with the
totally. And
technology.
and I read an article recently. It was a study by Deloitte where they looked at spend on AI, and 93% of the spend they discovered was going to the technology and only 7% to enable the people on how to use it. And the analogy that I've been using recently, I enjoy photography. I do it as a hobby. I'm by no means a pro, but I know enough to know I couldn't hand someone a $5,000 camera and call them a photographer. You would never think of doing that. Yet we hand people these tools and we say, "You're an expert. Go change the way you work." What? I've been doing this for 30 years of my life. What do you mean just change the way I work? So we spend time with our customer base to understand their business, to take them through on the journey of how to use these technologies. And then before we roll them out, help them understand, how they'll use it, how it will change their processes, how it will change their workers' day. Because by the way, not only is that just good behavior and good practice, but a lot of these people are afraid that you're handing them a tool that they're training to replace themselves. And that's just not a good way to ever live and run a business and be a human being. So, I think we're doing ourselves a complete disservice when all we do is focus on the ones and zeros and, not the human element in all of it.
Absolutely. And that's usually the untapped power behind some of the rules and the context that you're able to,
Yeah.
infuse some of your models with. So well, Adam, thank you so much. I knew it was going to be an exciting conversation. We're looking forward to more solutions together, getting more of your team to share some of the stories that we've had. One thing I always like to ask guests is there a content piece or a blog or a YouTube channel or someplace where you, would recommend informing oneself with the latest and greatest and, adding to their favorites bar?
Just in general or
In
about
general,
tungsten?
yeah, in
Oh
general. Like what's your
boy.
go-to, suggestion for where I find
Yeah.
my info?
My info. So for me, personally, it's my X feed. And I've
Okay.
got that algorithm so trained that there's no politics, there's no annoying anything. It is just my nerd
Yeah.
feed. So,
Yeah.
I've got a list that I've shared with, employees at my company about accounts that I follow, but then I've learned interact a little bit. You like a few things, you bookmark a
Mhm.
few things, you click into a few of the threads, and the algorithm begins to learn. So when I wake up every morning, I look, it's got all the latest in AI, in my X feed. So not only should you follow the brand names, of course, like OpenAI and Anthropic and Google Gemini and all those, but I start to find others experts in the industry that write a lot about things that they've discovered, tinkerers. I block all the nonsense, the such and such is dead, people, because I don't want that. I want the people in the trenches that are actually doing the work. So find a few of those, start interacting with them, and then your algorithm will really pick up
Yeah.
some steam. And I learned that's how I learn about all the
Yeah.
new emerging capabilities in the market.
Yep. No, I think that's it's definitely a way to aggregate all of it because,
Yeah.
it's even very difficult for us to, go through the noise, but it's a good way to synthesize it. Well, thanks again for your time. I appreciate the partnership and we'll be back with another episode soon. Thanks all.
Paula, thanks for having me. Thanks.